My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 69 years old, a widow, and I live quietly in Seattle, Washington. For most of my life, I was a wife, a mother, and a bookkeeper at a small supply store. I thought the hardest part of my story had ended when I buried my husband Robert, but I was wrong. The real test came the week after my son's wedding. That morning, when I opened my front door, I saw my new daughter-in-law standing there with a stranger who carried a heavy briefcase. She smiled with politeness, but not with warmth. The man walked straight to my kitchen table and set down a thick folder. Across the top of the first page were the bold words, "Power of Attorney." I did not touch it. I let the steam rise from my teacup and kept silent. My silence unsettled them, but they did not know that silence had always been my strongest weapon. Inside my mind, one truth burned bright. Robert had left me $52 million hidden in a trust that no one else knew existed. Before his last breath, Robert pressed my hand and whispered, "Do not tell them, not yet. One day, you will understand why." Standing in my kitchen, looking at that folder, I finally understood. The day my daughter-in-law arrived with a lawyer, expecting me to hand over my life with a penstroke, was the day my story truly began. If you have ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or quietly dismissed, then you already understand why this story matters. This is not only about money, it is about dignity, patience, and the armor that silence can provide. My husband's final gift was not just wealth, it was protection. And this is the story of how I learned to wear it. The wedding of my only son, Michael, should have been one of the brightest days of my life. I ironed my best navy dress, polished my shoes, and told myself that love would carry me through the awkwardness of being the widow who now walked alone. The church smelled of lilies and floor polish, the kind of shine that turns every step into a whisper. Guests hurried past with gifts and cameras, their laughter rising like music I was not part of. An usher checked his clipboard and guided me to table 14 in the reception hall. When I arrived, I realized I had been placed behind a column wrapped with flowers. The vase in the center was tall enough to block my view of the dance floor. From where I sat, I saw only fragments and edge of the cake, a corner of the head table, the hem of a gown passing by. I told myself a seat was only wooden fabric, not a judgment. Yet deep down I knew what it meant. Across the room, Samantha's mother, Margaret, glowed like a queen. She was placed near the cameras, her laughter filling the space as if she owned it. Photographers circled her table. She raised her glass, and every eye followed. I lifted my own glass quietly, careful not to draw attention. When the first dance began, the column cut the view completely. I could hear the applause, the music swelling, but I could not see my son's smile. I leaned left, then right, searching for a glimpse until I gave up and sat straight. Smiling into the flowers felt safer than showing how much it hurt. Later, when it was my turn to give a toast, I kept it brief. I spoke of Michael's first toolbox and the day he learned to keep the bubble between the lines. The room offered polite claps, nothing more. I sat quickly, relieved it was over. In that moment, I realized invisibility does not always mean absence. Sometimes it means being present, but ignored. Many of you watching may know that feeling being placed just out of sight at a celebration you helped make possible. That night, I chose silence as my shield. I let the cameras focus elsewhere. I smiled, but inside I carried the weight of years, decades of sacrifice, of saying no so that others could say yes. And as I watched the room from behind that wall of flowers, I promised myself one thing. If ever my strength was tested, I would not let anyone reduce me to decoration again. After the wedding, when the noise of celebration faded and my house returned to its quiet rhythm, I thought of Robert. My husband was never a man of show. He measured twice, cut once, and saved the extra nails in coffee tins lined up in the basement. He believed in mending before buying, in saving before spending. Neighbors called it thrift. I called it his quiet form of faith. I still remember the last night he pressed a brass key into my palm. His voice was thin, his body tired, but his eyes were steady. "Keep this safe, Eleanor. Use it when you need to, not when you are begged or shamed. Promise me you will remember that." I promised. At the time, I did not understand what he meant. Days after the funeral, I found the courage to try the key. Behind the pegboard in the basement, there was a panel I had never noticed. Behind the panel, a safe. The key turned with a soft click, and the air that came out smelled of cedar and old paper. Inside were folders, each one labeled in Robert's careful hand: insurance, taxes, pensions. On top rested a blue folder, inside a letter. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer beside you. I have prepared what I could, and the rest is your judgment. This is armor, not bragging." The pages that followed revealed numbers I had never imagined. $52 million. Decades of savings, investments, and quiet discipline had grown into a fortune. He had placed everything into an irrevocable trust in my name alone. Claws as strong as steel guarded it. No one could touch it without proof of my incapacity. I sat on the old workbench and let the truth settle. Robert had lived simply, patching fences and clipping coupons while quietly building a fortress. I brushed my hand over his signature and felt both love and sorrow. He had kept this secret not to deceive me, but to shield me. His last lesson was written not in sermons, but in legal documents. Protection can be humble, strength can be silent. That night, I returned the folder to its place. I whispered thank you to the shadows and promised Robert I would wear the armor when the day came. I did not know how soon that day would arrive. 3 mornings after the wedding, the doorbell rang while the kettle sighed on the stove. When I opened the door, Samantha stood there in a cream coat, polished smile fixed in place. Beside her was a man in a grey suit carrying a leather briefcase. He handed me a card before I could even ask his name. Andrew Clark, attorney at law. "We thought it would be helpful to go over a few protective documents for you," Samantha said, as if she were doing me a favor. Her tone was light, but her eyes were measuring every detail of my face. I let them in because manners do not expire. I set 3 cups on the table and poured black tea. Samantha thanked me, but never tasted hers. Andrew opened his briefcase and laid out a folder in the center. Across the top, in bold type, it read, "Power of Attorney and Healthcare Proxy, Mrs. Hayes." Andrew began with practice confidence. "This is a standard set of documents. They allow your son and his wife to assist with financial and medical decisions should the need arise. It is really best practice for seniors who live alone. Jenna's husband is asking about the money we borrowed for the venue. It's temporary," Samantha whispered. Andrew said if Eleanor signs, Michael can consolidate everything. We can roll the cards, clear the wedding, pay the retainer. I just need her to stop being difficult. Difficult, that was the word. Margaret clicked her tongue. Difficult is what people call a woman with boundaries. The boutique is behind 3 months. The landlord wants certified funds and your student loans. They're about to come due again. I stood behind the newspaper rack, hidden but listening. My pulse slowed, not from fear, but from confirmation. Now I knew why the urgency. It was not about my health or safety. It was about their debt. Samantha's voice broke. "I never planned to beg an old woman. I am not a thief. I just need a door to open." Margaret's reply was cool, practiced. "You will apologize. You will smile. You will use the word care. It softens everything." I stepped back quietly, letting their words harden into memory. Story, Part 3. The unmoving line, lines 1 to 90. They did not see me, and I did not want them to. There was no need for confrontation. I had heard what mattered. Inside the pharmacy, the clerk asked if I wanted hearts or flags on my stamps. Flags, I answered. I wanted the kind of symbol that says firm, steady, unchanging. As I walked back to my car, I repeated Robert's advice in my mind. Silence is not weakness. It is waiting for the right question from the right person. What I had heard in that parking lot proved I was right to wait, right to hold my line. I drove home slowly, the strip of stamps tucked in my wallet like a quiet promise. My armor was not theory anymore. It was necessary. A few days later, Samantha and Michael returned, this time without Andrew. She carried her phone like it was a shield, and Michael trailed a step behind her, shoulders bent. I had already set 3 cups on the table. Habit dies slowly, but my hands stayed folded in my lap. We have talked it over, Samantha began smoothly. Family should not need lawyers to love one another. This can be simple. A notary could come Friday. It would be quick. A kindness to you. She listed the documents again. Durable power for finances, medical decisions, a short list of assets that would be easier under one hand. She spoke as if my life were a math problem waiting to be solved. I raised my palm gently, the way a crossing guard stops traffic. Why the hurry? I asked. She laughed lightly. Life is a hurry. No one plans a fall. Why me alone? I pressed. Because Michael is your only child. Because you seem tired. Tired. The word pretended to be concerned, but it carried insult in its pocket. I turned to Michael. Have you read these papers? He hesitated. Andrew has. I trust him. He does this all the time. I stood and went to the hutch. From the second drawer, I pulled the blue folder David had labeled. I set it on the table, squared its corners with my fingers, and laid a notary ribbon across the top. Robert provided for me in ways you cannot imagine, I said. You can take care of each other, but I do not need anyone to take care of me. The room went still. Samantha's smile faltered. Michael's shoulders sagged as if a tire had lost its air. I slid a card onto the table. In clean black letters, it read, I never signed documents presented without counsel. All communications go through my attorney. Drafts must be provided 48 hours in advance. That is my boundary, I said softly. It is not up for negotiation. Michael looked down at the table. Samantha lifted her cup, but did not drink. I held my silence until it grew heavier than any speech. When they finally rose to leave, I walked them out with steady steps. Later belongs to those who respect today, I said as they crossed the porch. The wind lifted the maple branches like small flags. This time I felt their weight steadying me, not pressing me down. The following Sunday afternoon, Michael returned alone. His jacket was too thin for the wind again, and his keys were clenched in his fist as if they might anchor him. When I opened the door, he did not step in right away. He looked past me as if the clock on the kitchen wall could speak for him. Inside, the kettle hummed. We sat at the table where so many conversations had now turned into battles. His voice cracked as he began. Mom, Samantha is furious. She says, you embarrassed us. She says, you don't trust family. She says, I need to protect our future. I folded my hands and let the silence count to 5 before I spoke. I am protecting mine, I said. And in time, that protects yours too. He rubbed his forehead. She will not let it go unless she signs something. Anything. I will not, I answered plainly. His eyes filled with confusion and shame. Why does this feel like war? Because peace built on surrender is not peace, I said. You worry about losing face. I worry about losing myself. Losing face can be repaired. Losing myself cannot. He looked up, then truly looked at me. His eyes shone not with anger, but with the fear of a boy who had just discovered the cost of avoiding conflict. She says, I'm weak if I don't make this happen. You are not weak for refusing harm. I said weakness. is knowing a thing is wrong and doing it anyway. He let out a long breath, shoulders sinking. What should I tell her? Tell her the boundary is firm. Tell her I have counsel. Tell her love without consent is controlled by another name. He flinched but nodded. And if she leaves me, then you will face loss honestly, not by stealing safety from your mother. For the first time in weeks, he reached toward my hand, though he stopped halfway. I wanted to close the distance, but I held my stillness. Boundaries are not just for strangers. Sometimes they are the only gift a mother can give her child. When he stood to leave, the keys in his pocket no longer rattled. His spine was straighter, and though my heart ached, I knew the lesson had finally begun. The following week, I met David Lawson at his office, a small bungalow with lilacs blooming by the porch. Inside, he laid out the final stack of documents like a map. One by one, I signed what strengthened me. The deed placed into the trust, the medical directives updated, the will reinforced with a no-contest clause. A notary pressed her seal onto the pages, each red stamp blooming like a small sun. When it was done, David closed the binder with a quiet satisfaction. Eleanor, you did everything right. People confused loud with strong. What you did here, that is real strength. I carried the binder home and placed it in Robert's safe. The brass key clicked steady as a heartbeat. For the first time in months, I felt the house breathe with me. The walls seemed taller, the air lighter. That evening, Michael stopped by again. He looked tired, worn down by arguments I had not witnessed. He sat at the table, silent at first. Finally, he whispered, "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore." I reached for the words I had practiced. "I love you, I will not sign, and I will always answer when you call me with respect." He stared at me, then nodded slowly. Something in his eyes shifted. Not victory, not defeat, but understanding. For once, he saw that my refusal was not rejection, it was protection. As night fell, I brewed 2 cups of tea, one for myself and one for Robert's memory. I placed his old plaid shirt on the chair across from me. The fabric still held the faint trace of soap and cedar. I touched the cuff and whispered, "The armor you left fits." The maple tree outside rustled as if in agreement. I understood then that my silence was no longer about hiding. It was about standing tall without shouting. This is what I want you to remember as you listen to my story. Boundaries are not walls that keep love out. They are fences with gates that open only for the right reasons. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to hold your line, even against people you love? I read every word, and I promise your voice matters here. Because in the end, real strength is not in the noise you make. It is in the steady hand that signs only in the right place.